If that's not awesome, I don't know what it is. Just look at it. Yeah, giant robots, baby. How not you like them, huh? Yeah, that's something I've been asking myself for quite some time now. But reality is often disappointing. Giant robots is unfortunately an endangered species at the moment. You'll see them less and less in all forms of media every year despite being iconic to Japan, which makes me sad because I always liked them. Mecha is a genre I don't want gone. I still like them and I have hopes that it will reach its renaissance at some point, but for now the situation is pretty slow for them. Mechas used to be very popular, but at some point something happened and the genre started to fall apart. In this video, I'll tell you what makes giant robots so cool, how they met their downfall, and what can be done to save the genre, so sit down and enjoy the trip. I always liked giant robots. It's a childhood passion just like cars. I watched shows like Transformers, Power Rangers, Macross, Voltron, and Megas XLR when I was a kid, and I loved them all. I even had their toys. It was something I could share with my tiny bunch of childhood friends. But it was also something everyone around me enjoyed. But it wasn't for nothing. Back in the day, I hardly ever met any kid at my age who didn't like them. Giant robots were such a success that every kid wanted a Megazord for Christmas. I clearly remember people liking robots as much as they liked superheroes. Me and my friends even tried to imitate their poses. Come on, combining robots to make an even bigger robot? That was sick back then. And speaking of superheroes, that reminded me of the first Transformers movie. I was 12 when it was released. I remember the hype, the movie that made everyone wanted Camaro. Everywhere I went where I saw Camaro, everyone stopped to take pictures. The success of the movie wasn't a small feat. If it was, Transformers wouldn't be getting movies to this day, right? It's part of the pop culture. I still enjoy watching the first movies. You could say I'm a fanboy, since back then I used to point at certain cars on the streets with my cousin and tell which ones were Autobots or Decepticons. Even in video games. Transformers is one of the most successful mecha franchises ever, and it's evident there's all sorts of media of Transformers. Oh boy, how I miss the PS2 game. I wish that one got remastered. Transformers just have enough lore to make countless games, animations, comics, and etc. Lore is deep enough to be considered a black hole, because as soon as you get in, there is no way you're getting out. With all that said, let's ask the important question. What makes them so cool? I don't think it needs a genius to answer this question. Blockbusters are a thing for obvious reasons. Everyone likes to go to theaters to watch exciting movies packed with action, explosions, mesmerizing visuals, and the fun it brings. Transformers had all of that, so watching it in theaters was especially fun. But mecha wasn't exciting just in theaters. A few years ago, I decided to watch a bunch of episodes of the original Power Rangers, and boy, it was exciting to watch. The music, the cheesy action, the tokusatsu fights portrayed by real people in costumes, yeah, it still holds up. If you have kids, watch with them, I highly recommend. But the best of them all is Megas XLR. It's my all-time favorite mecha show and my all-time favorite giant robot as well. Megas XLR is especially cool considering the muscle car design, the tone of the story, the badassery of the protagonist, and the fact the story and the action is not taken too seriously. It's a story that just focuses on being fun, which it totally is. Even non-mecha people enjoyed this show. And that's about it. Mecha was always liked among people for the spectacle it brings. However, something happened along the way and people stopped enjoying this. What was it? Well, Evangelion happened. Neon Genesis Evangelion. An anime a lot of people like and a lot of people dislike. I used to be one of those who didn't like it. I pretty much hated it from 2017 to 2019, which is the time gap between when I first watched it and when I decided to give it a second watch. After that, I grew to love it. I completely understand those who hate it though, it's not for everyone. Evangelion changed the genre forever. It caused a major impact when it was released. It's a deconstruction of the genre. You don't watch it for the spectacle. Instead, Evangelion is a rather deep psychological exploration of the human mind. It's a depressing story with a tragic ending, and Hideaki Anno's pick for a protagonist of such story was a depressed teenager with no self-esteem or love for his life whatsoever. Many people don't like Shinji, and I completely understand why, but he works perfectly for the purpose of this story. This changed the genre because after Evangelion, everyone who watched mecha shows started to question the gravity of the events, the mental health of the protagonists, and they wanted to see the stakes being raised, which wasn't an easy task to the genre. This leads us to the next point: the gravity and scale of events. Before Evangelion, mecha shows were way less consequential with their events. A few years ago, I watched Mazinger Z, which is the first mecha as we know today, and it's clearly a show for kids. There were parts I watched and I was like, okay, this is a kid's show from 50 years ago, I'm not gonna be too harsh on it. But I can't just take it seriously when the city gets destroyed in every episode with events possibly more devastating than Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It gets silly when that happens too often. It becomes something like Powerpuff Girls. If a show wants to be taken seriously, it can't ignore mass destruction events like this, and all the lives that were lost in such events. It works for a kids show, but not for more mature shows. This is one of the major reasons why mecha ended up losing its popularity. Evangelion raised the awareness of the audience. They don't want to shrug off major events anymore. It needs to be impactful. And to be honest, I agree with that. It's the Zack Snyder effect applied much earlier, but to mechas instead of superheroes. Mass destruction events and lives lost in the process shouldn't be shrugged off and ignored like it happens in most MCU movies, which leads to the source of this problem. Power scale. Sure, everyone loves action, explosions, shootings, chases, and all the things that makes a movie or a show thrilling. But power scale is important to keep all of this exciting, otherwise it's just bullshit. Without wasting too much of my time, let's just take Naruto for an example of power scale. It all started with ninjas, substitution jutsus, hand signs, shurikens, kunais, and strategies. Classic Naruto was awesome. But then Naruto Shippuden happened and it started to bring laser beams, nukes, spiritual bullshit, destiny bullshit, Deus Ex Machina moment, godlike entities and powers, and of course, aliens. See the problem here? Yeah, that's exactly what happened to the mecha genre. At some point, robots became so powerful to the point of killing the power scale. There were no more stakes to be raised. Robots were literally invincible and that kills the excitement. It all gets ridiculous. There's no risk of losing, there's no balance in battle, no strategy. Just lasers and nukes, no more creativity, just giant steel Superman. And this led to a point where everything became repetitive. Audiences got bored of that. Most mecha anime stopped being grounded like most Gundam shows are. No more adrenaline, no more danger. And considering Gundam is still alive and well, pumping up hundreds of new anime with no competition since most modern mecha shows just get forgotten. It just says a lot about the genre. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. Let's go to the next problem Naruto had that reflects on the mecha genre. Fake depth puddle. I'm gonna use this term when I'm talking about stories that try too hard to be deep just to end up sounding stupid in the attempt. That's what happened to many mecha shows over time. They tried to copy Evangelion with its psychological depth only to fail stunningly. Proof of that is the fact that I remember many shows trying and I completely forgot their names. I had to look up my list to see what shows I actually watched, so here's some examples. Rumble Garandol, Sakugan, Granbelm, Listeners, and of course, Darling in the Franxx. I just brought up forgettable trash at first, but Darling in the Franxx is quite the sad one. It's a story that could have been a masterpiece. The very anime that could have brought mecha back to the top. But halfway through, it started going downhill and it ended up failing miserably. I'll get into that in a bit, but before I do, let me ask you, what happens when you mix bullshit power scale and fake depth puddle? Well, you have Metaphysical S-Pole. This is the abomination that kills the remaining interest anyone has in a mecha show. When a show tries to combine its philosophy and godlike powers to create something extremely hard to understand, or that doesn't make any fucking sense. When characters start to go through astral planes, talk to some ghost or divine entity or become them, they pull some incomprehensible magic that works for Deus Ex Machina moments and explains it with bullshit that you fail to understand, it all gets too complicated. Many mecha shows fail to stay grounded and decide to abandon logic at some point. It just gets boring. It only depicts the author trying too hard to sound deep when they're actually putting stuff only they understand in a story for everyone. A good example of that is every time Naruto talks to an entity like the Sage of Six Paths, or in Attack on Titan when Eren goes to the astral plane or wherever he is. You know one of the causes of this problem? That's right, aliens. Partner, I grew to hate this part. Okay, it's perfectly okay to have aliens in a sci-fi story, which is the case of so many good mecha shows out there. It's pretty much the case of Transformers, Macross, Gurren Lagann, Voltron, Megas XLR, and even Evangelion. It's acceptable, but some shows don't really need aliens to begin with. It can be another ass-pull, which was the case of Darling in the Franxx. The story didn't have aliens until near the ending, and it was absolutely unnecessary. It killed the story and any meaning it had to it. It even contradicted Dr. Frank's explanation about what happened to the world, which wasn't really good to begin with. It just felt gratuitous. Aliens can completely destroy the chances an anime has of staying grounded if they're not introduced or hinted prior. But it feels like every anime from 2007 to now needs to involve aliens, so it makes me roll my eyes when they're brought to the story without any early sign. These are the main problems that led mecha to meet its downfall as a genre, and in my opinion, that's not all. I think there's yet another problem that helped it, but it's less related to mecha, but more related to fiction in general. Realism happened. You see, from the 2010s to now, people started wanting realism in everything. Gone are the days where people didn't care about such thing. And mechas were never aimed at realism, so that ended up damaging the genre. Companies knew that and tried to make some of them realistic, which led to the overcomplication of plots, unnecessarily long scientific explanations that would make Christopher Nolan proud, and not enough action, explosions, and rock and roll. This, however, isn't what happened to the majority of mecha stories. It's rather the lack of realism that damaged them. They still had the overcomplicated plots, unnecessarily long scientific explanations, not enough rock and roll and coolness, and still felt goofy. So most people weren't into that anymore. They wanted something they'd take more seriously. The genre, unfortunately, couldn't decide whether to stick to goofy or serious tone, and that helped it damaging the genre further. Now that's enough complaining. I know some of you might not like what I just said, because in fact there's stories with all these things I explained and yet they succeeded. So let's talk about successful mecha shows. I just said every reason why Evangelion, Transformers, Megas XLR, and Power Rangers were successful, so let me talk about other mecha shows as well. Gurren Lagann. Darling in the Franxx might have been a disaster, but at least you got attached to the characters, which made the show popular to begin with. That's the case of Gurren Lagann. All characters there are likable, you can sympathize with all of them. This spectacle was only a part of their awesomeness, and Gurren Lagann teaches you a lot through its run. You can take life lessons from it. Thank you, Kamina. Gurren Lagann is the polar opposite of Evangelion, and unlike Darling in the Franxx, it is good from start to end. It had aliens, metaphysical stuff, and ridiculous power levels. Hell, you had a robot bigger than several universes together, and still managed to be fun. The plot is really simple and easy to understand. No overcomplicated stuff, and it didn't take itself super seriously. Gurren Lagann has a special place in my heart, and I'll always remember it. Code Geass. You know, a lot of people say politics and entertainment shouldn't be mixed, and while I do agree that you shouldn't include real-life politics in stories, especially when they're fantasy, political drama in stories aren't necessarily a bad thing. Code Geass, for one, is entirely political. It's an anime you don't watch for spectacle. You're bored in a political drama, which is pretty interesting and very well executed. Code Geass is the ultimate proof that political drama can be thrilling. It just needs to be well executed. Evangelion did it before, but in Code Geass' case, that is the focus. But we'll talk about that in a future video. For now, let's just focus on mecha. Pacific Rim. This movie is part of my top 20 movies ever. It does its job in a simple, straightforward way. No overcomplicated plot or unnecessarily long scientific explanations of anything. No bullshit power levels. It doesn't try to be deep and philosophical. It just is what it is. Giant robots fighting giant monsters to save the Earth. Plot is simple, action is amazing, it's visually stunning, and it's as grounded as it can be. Guillermo del Toro did his best with this movie. It's basically a modern day tokusatsu, which makes me happy. A shame it was ruined by its sequel. Not even the Netflix animation, which is pretty good by the way, was enough to save the franchise. Really a shame. Megaton Musashi. This is a new anime I watched recently, and let me tell ya, if you're still disappointed with Darling in the Franxx and it left you empty, then watch Megaton Musashi. It's an anime based on a video game that I really wanna play, and it's very well executed. Plot isn't too complicated. Aliens invaded Earth and killed 99.9% of the human race, opened a hole in the middle of Earth, making it look like a donut, and humans used giant robots to fight back. It doesn't go much further than that, except for the last 4 episodes that feels a little rushed, but that's it. It's still an 8 out of 10 for me. This anime has likable characters, simple plot, amazing action that feels like a hack and slash with mechas, and a good pacing. It has political drama too, but once again, well executed and thrilling. This anime made me realize that in a mecha story, the main character's personality dictates the pace of the fights. Take Shinji for an example. He's depressed, has a low self-esteem, and is a coward, so the action in Evangelion is rather slow and lacks joy. Coop is a laid-back gamer, muscle car enthusiast, and a complete badass, so fights feel like watching crazy combos on a video game. In Megaton Musashi's case, Yamato is a delinquent who loves the danger. He's the high-risk, high-reward kind of person, so the action feels like it's a hack and slash. I wonder if the game feels that way. The Iron Giant. I'd like to bring up The Iron Giant as well, a classic animated movie about an alien super robot who develops feelings towards humans after one of them becomes his best friend. It's a very emotional story, just the way I like it, and it can make a man cry, because I surely did. It should be noted that The Iron Giant has none of the things I said people like about mecha stories. No action scenes, no destruction, very little number of explosions, and no overcomplicated plot or scientific explanations. We don't even know where the Iron Giant came from, but it still manages to be amazing. I highly recommend for all ages. Now you might be asking, but Han, where's Gundam? Sorry, I might love giant robots, but I've only watched 2 Gundam shows, the original 1979 one and Gundam 08, so I feel like I don't have much priority to talk about the very anime series that's keeping the mecha genre alive. Anyway, I already talked too much about shows that exist, so now let's get to the real question. How can the genre be saved? Well, here's my suggestions. The mecha renaissance. I think the best way to bring mecha back to the top is through video games, kinda like what Red Dead Redemption did to the Wild West genre. Armored Core 6 should be the first step towards that. The gaming industry always needs innovation, and since we're living in an era of RPGs and open world games, this is the perfect time to bring up an open world RPG mecha game. A few years ago, 3 friends told me that such game exists, which is Xenoblade X. I look forward to play this one, but it's unfortunately stuck to Nintendo Wii U, so the only way I can play it is through emulation, because Nintendo Wii U was never sold in my country, so yeah, fuck Nintendo. Still though, I think there should be more than just Xenoblade X. I think more open world RPG mecha games should be made. They should let you build your robot, customize them like you did in classic racing games, do side quests with it. Can you imagine how awesome this would be? I keep dreaming about it. Just like isekai anime, I think RPGs should switch off from medieval fantasy for a moment and bring us something different, in which case it's mecha stuff. Now, open world RPG isn't the only way, there should be more. Like, I love the movie Real Steel, and I think that universe is way too big to stay in one single movie. Come on, bring us a big budget mecha fighting game. maybe set in that universe. I can totally see it working, but don't give us a mobile game, give us at least a AA one. Like, I played Titanfall 2's campaign and I loved it. I don't really play online that much, let alone PvP. I haven't played it since 2011. And yet I think Titanfall deserves more. I've been all in for an open world Titanfall game with customizable robots. Mecha is an awesome genre and shouldn't be stuck to mobile turn-based strategy games. It deserves better than just that. That's just my opinion though. All in all, the mecha genre was born from Spectacle and has that as its selling point, but Spectacle isn't enough to keep a franchise, or in this case, an entire genre alive. Audiences will inevitably get bored and find it repetitive, which is proven by how low superhero movies have been doing lately. Same goes for Transformers movies. Some franchises really should give their audiences a break instead of pumping up stuff every year. That said, any franchise or genre can be saved, and the key for that is innovation. Only by innovating, a franchise or genre can stay alive long enough, which is how the Gundam series still thrive. Also, since I just said that gaming is the best way to save the genre, just take a look at what Red Dead Redemption did to the Wild West. And since I brought up superheroes, just look at superhero games like the Arkham series, the 2018 Spider-Man game, and the Injustice series. If these aren't enough to prove you that gaming can save dying genres, I don't know what else to tell you. Before I go though, I wanna share a little something with you. Years ago I had this idea for a story. It would be set in the Wild West, because of course a cowboy like me would have it set in the Wild West, right? Anyway, in it there would be 5 saloons that turned it into giant robots, and all 5 of them would combine and form a Megazord. Basically Power Rangers in the Wild West. If any writer is watching this, please make this real. Now here's a little fun fact for you. The first giant robot, no, the first robot ever written in history was Talos from Greek mythology. More about him in the video I'll leave in the description. Which means the Greek invented mecha, not the Japanese. Didn't expect that, did you? Anyway, that's all I wanted to talk about. Please like and subscribe. I'll catch you later then.